Hey y'all. Hey, can you see me right now? I feel like I'm trying to turn on a stream and it's not connecting properly. So, if you can see me, then I've done something wrong. I'm very good. How are you? I'm I'm struggling. Oh my gosh. Okay. So I don't know what's going on right now, but hang on. I'm gonna send a message real quick. I okay. I went live on a different stream for some reason. Okay. This is chaos. This is chaos. Um okay. Okay. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. All right. I'm back. I This threw me for a loop. So here's what's happened. I I set up my stream, but I also installed some new stuff. So now there we go. Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry for that. Um I scheduled a stream, but I installed new stuff on my streaming software, and as a result, everything went bonkers. And now we're good. Thank y'all for being patient with my technical difficulties. I'm glad I ran into them now before I actually needed to stream on an actual group stream or anything. But yeah, here we go. Here we go. Um, so uh, I think I think this particular session that I'll be talking about is actually going to ring true for one of our wonderful viewers this evening. Um, I'm going to be talking about uh, I'm going to be talking about a little shopping journey. This was one of my favorite sessions of all time, but it all started with just kind of veering off the path just a little bit, just a little bit, because the hook in this case was fairly simple. The group had to go see the mayor, but in this case, because of everything that was going on at that moment, especially with, I believe, one of the characters doing some kind of performance. This was a scenario where it was pandemonium. The group just took care of a big boss, and there was a lot of destruction. And in the aftermath, the mayor, in his opulent carriage, drives by and sees the chaos. And in this case, well, I believe one of the players was doing some sort of performance out in the street. I want to say it was a song of some sort, but it's been long enough that I'm not 100% anymore. But with that, the mayor, with his whims, wanted them to perform at his mansion. And they agreed. And after a few sessions, I mean, I had a little bit of a veer off from that because, I mean, sometimes if you don't have the full group, you gotta figure out what you can do in the meantime. But when we got back to this, I'll admit, I did not expect the performance to be as crazy as it was. Nor did I expect the lead up to the performance to be as crazy as it was. Because, I mean, typically when those sorts of things have come up in other games that I've played in, it's just, oh, there's a performance, but then usually something else happens, something crashes, and that's like the big thing. The lead-in time isn't super crazy either, but in this one, I don't remember if I did it or if one of the players initiated it, but I want to say it was one of the players. I'm not gonna say his name, but I believe he had mentioned that like everyone should get ready for it, and in getting ready for it, you get your clothes, you get if there's any supplies you need for said performance. And I mean, again, I think back to the past, and in those situations, it's usually like a very hand wavy, like, okay, we get our performance stuff. All right, on to the next thing, on to the performance, and then like amidst the performance is where we'll get the real thing, right? But my players were so delightful that they really ran with it. And my mind was blown because all I was thinking initially was just, okay, maybe I can give a little bit of freedom here of like, oh, what is everyone gonna want to get to be ready? What is everyone gonna want to wear? But then the descriptions that came in were mind-blowing. I didn't expect it at all. And hang on, I'm gonna switch over to my trusty sheets here because I think having these notes will be beneficial for this. But yeah, here we go. So as the shopping part started, I simply asked all my players to consider what they might want to wear for the performance, and to think about how to describe what they want to wear. And they have total freedom as far as like colors, as far as the fabric, as far as like what the individual pieces of clothing were. And oh my gosh, it was wild. Like I will say, what was great was that I was able to leave off with a cliffhanger of saying, hey, think about this. Think about what you want. Because that would give all the players time to consider what they might want to get. And then when we started the session, all I did was go from one person to the next to ask, hey, so you want that? Great. If you want that, then where do you think your character would likely go to get it? Wealthier place, or are you going a little more like middle class, or are you going someplace more like maybe lower class where you might be able to find some up and comer? And what my players had come up with was beautiful. But from there, since they had the chance to think, at that point, all I thought was, okay, I've been in stores before, so draw from personal experience. I've been in plenty of stores before. I've been in like the sort of hoity-toity stores, and I've also been in like very dumpy kind of stores too. And the way you're treated is very different. And it also kind of depends on what you're wearing too. And in this case, I had the players roll. I had them roll so that they could that would determine like what their chances of success were as far as trying to find what they wanted, where they wanted it, and then I also made some rolls too as far as how well they would be received at each place. But from there, oh man, I'll describe one of them, one in particular. The character's name was Havilar, and this was such a wild choice, but the player wanted an outfit that was like all beige everything, and that's how it started. And I was like, initially I was thinking like, and this was how I felt with all of the options of like, oh, I could just do it where they get it, right? They have it. But I figured, hey, if we're going through the nitty-gritty here, if we're going to have these moments beforehand, let's make them entertaining. Let's make them interesting. So, when Havilar decided to go to find this all beige everything, like all beige like suit, beige jumpsuit pants, beige, I believe beige like shoes with eye-bleedingly purple socks. And I gotta say, like all these elements, I wouldn't have expected any of this, but my players are amazing, and so they came up with this incredible detail. In which case, in this situation, it became a situation of like, okay, we know these elements that the character wants. There was I believe a gold chain involved, but also, and this was the big thing, and it's like, if you're in a situation where you're running a game and you want to get into making something mundane, like shopping, into something very interesting, you latch on to one element that you can really play with. And oh man, sorry, I just noticed how small that looks. My apologies. I'm gonna try to zoom in a little bit so that'll be easier for y'all to follow along. But you latch onto one element? Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think so, at least. Here's the hard part. It's like, I think we all know what Havilar's favorite color is, but I don't know if it's like they were trying to do the beige so that all the other things will stand out a lot more or not. I don't know. It blew my mind. But you latch onto the one element that you can really play with that has more variety. In this case, there's the beige everything, the purple, the gold chain, but the player also wanted a Hawaiian shirt. And this was a situation where I'm like, okay, I can picture a Hawaiian shirt, but because of this game being online, where we can share screen, we can show each other these elements, I decided to share my screen with all the players, and this was a little bit of a risk. I'm glad I had safe search on, but I searched for Hawaiian shirts, and I just wanted I wanted the player to choose one. And it's like having these elements where it's not just, oh, I have some random shirt. This is the level of detail that we can go into. I believe the player ended up choosing a Hawaiian shirt with pineapple faces with sunglasses on them. And in this case, it's like being able to provide that vivid imagery. It made it so that when we actually got into like having the players put them on and go into the performance, it was so much easier to actually picture it, to become immersed in the moment. Because then once I had this detail of Havilar, I had the details of all the other characters too, and so then it makes it so that when they make their grand entrance, and this is, I mean, I love describing that epic slow-mo hero walk in, and it makes it just so much easier when you have those specifics. When I can talk about Havilar stepping in, all beige everything, eye-bleedingly purple socks, gold chain, Hawaiian shirt with a pineapple face and sunglasses on it, like all those elements just make that moment feel so much more powerful. Now, another little thing that I added onto these moments was simply the ability to interact as though you're in a real store, but make some element a little crazy. So, in this case, for Havilar, she went into this store that was, because of the description of like the beige and the Hawaiian shirt, I was like, okay, this is gonna be Old Navy. This is gonna be fantasy Old Navy. And from there, all I could think, like all I needed was to describe and try to drop as many clues as possible. And here's the thing, it's like if you're describing a place, you could say it's like Old Navy, and that's a very quick way to get to it. Another thing that you can do that can make it almost like a fun guessing game is if you're drawing inspiration from the real world, is that you describe it in such a way that maybe your players will figure out that it's like Old Navy. It's like you can just drop enough breadcrumbs where it can be like this fun game where someone can be like, wait a second, you're doing that? What? But just having that inspiration, I was able to describe the elements of like going in, having so many checkout counters, having like very bright lights, very very bright colors, and then it's just a matter of populating it. And in this case, populating the Old Navy, all I could think of was filling it with goblins. Why did I want to fill it with goblins? I just seemed fun. In this case, it was like I just rolled the dice as far as what the service was going to be like. And for this player, I happened to roll very high. Like, this player was going to get the best service. Outstanding customer service. Now, outstanding customer service doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be like a super smooth experience by any means. But in this case, it was simply player went in, asked for what they wanted, and I had someone come up who was like the manager. And I made sure to describe them as maybe being a little bit more confident and being able to, with a wave of their hand, call forth other helpers to which this manager could bark orders at. And then they would go off and follow. And then you establish that hierarchy. And what I did with these characters was I had this manager essentially, like all the other elements, the beige, the ones I didn't want to focus on, I had them, they could just get those. I was going to gloss over all of those in favor of my favorite element that I chose earlier, which was the Hawaiian shirt. And so as I'm describing everything, I essentially had, because I pulled up the Google Images, pulled up 8 pictures of Hawaiian shirts for her to choose from. And from there, my description, while the player was choosing, I had it presented as though the goblins each ran off with the orders, and they were each tasked with obtaining the perfect Hawaiian shirt. And so then when the goblins came back, each of them would hold it up as though it's some grand trophy or some grand gift. I'm thinking kind of like presenting an offering to the goddess that was Havilar. And each time something wasn't quite to her liking, like, I mean, in a normal shopping situation, it would just be like, no, that's not really for me. And everything's chill. But in this case, again, we're making the elements just a little bit crazy. They're outstanding customer service. The manager would look over at that goblin who presented the shirt, who, oh, whoa, hey, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. I got it yesterday, and I'm feeling myself, so thank you. Right now, we're just talking about how to make any session interesting. Specifically, how I made a shopping session more interesting. By focusing in on heightening certain elements, making them a little bit crazy. In this case, I had 8 goblins go forth, and each of them presented a Hawaiian shirt to the customer. And all of them were, they were doing so as though these were like grand offerings. And then every time the player would say, that one's not really for me, then the character would say that too, but then I would have the goblin just kind of react like, oh no. And then the manager would look over at them and just do like that menacing shake of the head as though they're going to be punished later for this. But finally, when Havilar decided on the Hawaiian shirt with the pineapple faces with sunglasses on them, I mean, in that case, I was thinking, hey, well, in this group with all these goblins working at this fantasy old navy, I want them to be able to, I want there to be some sort of win here. It's not just shopping. I want there to be some sort of payoff, especially since we had such amazing roles. Such amazing roles for the customer service, for her to be able to find this place. And so what I had was, I had the most puny looking, maybe least confident goblin step forth, to the point where like as he's moving forward, he's just, yeah, super scary manager. But this one goblin is just like tiny, and all the other goblins are kind of looking at him as though he's like the black sheep of the group. Well, he's the one who comes forward with the perfect Hawaiian shirt. At which point, Havilar is like, "That's amazing. Thank you." And even goes forth to tip this goblin extra. At which point, I mean, payoff is simple. Right now, the manager is going to give the positive feedback that this one little puny goblin has been wanting all this time since he started working here. And then all of his little friends can also be like, "All right, I guess you're one of us." And they all start cheering him. And again, like real world, someone makes a sale. I mean, in some companies, they might be like, "Whoa, yeah." And it'll be something very, very simple and mundane. But, I mean, I'm following that rule. You find just those little things to make crazier. And in this case, what I had was, because he was successful and he earned that big tip from Havilar, they all hoisted him up in the air and started doing that thing where it's like you throw them up, catch, throw them up, and it's like, you know, really celebrating this person. And that's what I did for this puny little goblin who, I mean, just based on the description, he just seemed very down on his luck. He wanted to do well, but maybe in the past he hadn't been able to. And so this was a small little win, but it was able to enhance this one moment, this normally very mundane moment of shopping, into something much more powerful, something much more memorable. And that's what I did with all the other shopping moments. It was simply a matter of each player figuring out what they wanted to get and then having a roll of the dice to see if they were lucky or not. So if you're ever in a, like, I'm going to give you a little breakdown. If you wanted to do this, and this only works if your players want to do this. This is very player focused, right? If this isn't your jam, by all means. And if it's not your player's jam, then definitely don't do it. But yeah, absolutely. Congratulations, little goblin. It was adorable. But it's like, if you are into it, and if your players are into it, then, oh, sorry, I did not silence my phone. My apologies. If you're into it and your players are into it, then by all means, go forward. But you have to make sure both of those are in line, because I'm in a situation where, as an improviser, whatever little mundane thing, I want to be able to challenge myself, to try to make it interesting, to try to make it funny. But if like, let's say shopping seems boring to you, then don't do it. And also, of course, if your players, if they're thinking about it, they just want to breeze through it to get to the next thing, then don't do it. But if all the stars align, then here's how I would do it if you wanted to give this a shot. First thing is give players lead time. So in this case, we had finished off a session and everyone knew that the performance was coming up. And in that case, I told everyone, hey y'all, think about what your character might want to wear. for the performance. And this, I mean, that game I play every 2 weeks. So there were 2 weeks in between in which they could think and consider what their character would want to wear if they were presenting to the most powerful person in this city. So once you've got the lead time, at that point, you can give yourself time to get ready. And when I say that, I don't mean getting a bunch of places ready, though you can. I would say this. Prep versus improv. The way I think of this is the more confident you are in your improv, the less prep you have to do. And vice versa. If you're less confident about your improv, then you can do more prep. Either way. But in this case, I erred more on the side of improv, of list building, in which all I was thinking about was list buildings. Woo. I am out of it. But all I thought about was list building of shopping experiences. I thought about, okay, if the players want to go someplace fancy, I've stumbled into some fancy places to buy things. And I like wearing different things, in which case the response is going to be very different. There was one time, just a short story. One time I went to a place called Saks Fifth Avenue. And I don't know if y'all have been there before. I've been there once. That was my first and last time going there, because it wasn't a bad place. They weren't snooty at all. It's just well beyond my means, because I went in there with my grandma, with my mom, with my aunt, and then we looked. There was a shoe. There was a shoe that looked a little funky, a little eccentric. And so we're like, oh, this is wild. And then one of the salespeople came up, and he was super nice. Like, he wasn't hoity-toity at all. He was super nice, but he smiled, and then he was like, hey, check this out. And he turned the shoe over, and we saw the price. And I was like, what? And I turned to my mom and my grandma and my aunt, and I was like, hey, we need to get out of here. Because lo and behold, that one shoe, and it would not surprise me if it were the cost of an individual shoe. Like, you had to pay double to actually get the pair. $1,200. At that point, I was like, oh no. I'm gonna sneeze and then owe a mortgage payment. And then I saw, like, there's another shoe in a glass case where they're like, there's 100 of these in the world. $2,500 for a limited time. And I'm like, all right, I think we're done here. And so we left. And that was one of those situations where, like, I drew from that. I remember that very vividly. And I was thinking, okay, for shopping, if someone wants to go in the rich area, this is an experience I can draw from, where I can describe it like that store. The employee could be like that man was, who was super nice. I mean, a lot of times when we think of, like, very expensive places, I mean, I've played plenty of shopkeepers who have looked down on whatever adventurer wandered in, but you don't have to. And that's why I leave it up to the dice. You roll the dice to see, yeah, right? I don't get it. I don't know why it was that expensive, but I mean, they were there. I mean, they were able to afford that huge department store, so they're doing something right. But yeah, it's like I was able to draw from that experience of expensive but nice people. In contrast with my usual of, like, and I really need to, expensive goods, not, Yeah, I really need to put this. Expensive goods, but snooty people. And that, yeah, like, you can leave that up to the dice. Yeah. Yeah, I am not a millionaire who can afford $2,500 shoes. I wish. I wish. This, like, that price. And I mean, I thought getting Jordans was expensive. Lo and behold, the gaudiest looking shoes. Wow. And you thought your $30 boots were expensive? Oh man. Yeah, if you I'll say your $30 boots are probably way more functional than these shoes were. Like, there were so many things attached that I was like, how does anyone walk around in any of these? Do people even put them on to wear, or do they just keep them in glass cases all the time? But that's the expensive end of the spectrum. Whereas I could also think to, like, okay, if someone wanted to go to someplace a little more homey, with more of a personal touch, you can think like a local shop, or maybe even like a festival, or like farmers markets, because one of my favorite things before everything went crazy was going to like an arts festival and being able to see like someone who made something and is there to sell it, and then being able to talk with them, because then, you know, you get a more personal touch, and people will tell you things. They'll tell you like, oh, if you're getting this, this is how you should take care of it, and like they'll give you more practical stuff. Because I mean, sometimes if you go into, like, I'm picturing like going into a very specialty boutique, in which maybe in that case they're trying to make another sale, and they might be like, oh, so you're getting this very special wallet, then you're going to want to make sure you get the oil too. Make sure you massage it every night, just like the cow was massaged, and you need to keep it in like this certain light condition and all that. And I could imagine them being in the situation of like wanting to make more and more sales, upselling you. Whereas, I mean, a lot of times when you're at these local places or these festivals, they just give you the practical stuff, so that it's like, so that you actually can, I mean, take care of your stuff without it being a hassle, and without it feeling like they're just looking at you as more commissions, more dollar signs. Right. Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, there are plenty of. I'll say this: I am jealous sometimes, because there are plenty of YouTubers that I've seen where they have like rooms filled with Jordans, and though I don't appreciate all of the shoes, every now and then I'll see one that like reminds me of when I used to watch Michael Jordan on TV, and I'm like, man, I wish I had that. But it feels definitely more like, for me, it'd be more of a nostalgia thing as opposed to like collecting and trying to flip shoes or anything like that. Okay, but first, you give players lead time. Second, prep. With list building, it's just a matter of figuring out all the things you know. And as I've said before, when it comes to list building, like if I were to say, oh, everything you know about stores, recite it all now, then that's very overwhelming, right? Especially if you're under pressure. But I prefer to think of list building not as inventing list building is not inventing every bit of knowledge about the store. List building is the practice of calling forth what you already know. So, I do this a lot in improv. If I'm given a suggestion of a word or a scenario or a shop, a profession, then I'm not trying to become an expert of like plumbing, for example. Rather, I already have everything I need to know right now, and I just push away everything else I don't need to know. So if I'm thinking of plumbing, I don't need to think about computers. I don't need to think about D&D. I don't need to think about basketball. All I have to do is push everything else aside so that plumbing is in my head. And so in this case, if you're list building, don't be overwhelmed by it, because you have everything you need to know. It's all just right there. You just need to recall it. And the more you recall it, the easier it'll get. But lead time, prep versus improv, and then once we're in the session, our goal now is to, of course, make your rolls. That's my favorite thing, because then if I'm surprised, it gives me a little bit of a boost, a little extra energy that I can use in the game. If I roll where my shop, like let's say the character's looking for a place that's a little bit like more affordable, and they roll low, then all of a sudden I can have them stumble into maybe in a place by the docks. Maybe they happen to stumble into the shop of the one guy who's like so fixated on the one thing. Like let's say our player wanted a watch, affordable but functional. Let's say that's what their goal was, and they rolled a 1. So it's not, I mean, they could just not find one. But in this case, what I picture is that maybe they find a place by the docks where they run into the most passionate person ever about watches. And this person is one of those collectors who has spent so much gold on watches. And they finally decided to set up a little boutique, but there's no one there. There are no customers because they spent all their money on their watches that they can't afford a boutique in the richest of places where people could afford it. They had to settle for this small, kind of out of the way boutique. And so everyone around is just walking by because they can't pay that much for a watch. But our character with that natural 1 might stumble into this place and suddenly realize, oh no, can I really afford a 5,000 gold watch? And then the person inside, again, I make a roll. See if this person is going to be very snooty about it or very friendly, very helpful. I mean, there's a chance. I mean, again, like I can think expensive goods, but nice person. Expensive goods, but snooty person. Like you can go either way here. Follow your role, follow your heart. Because you could very easily have the person who, like, they're like, hey, are you looking for this 5,000 gold watch? And then the character is like, oh, I actually don't know if I can afford that. Then the person could be, oh, I see. You're trying to haggle for a lower price, huh? I'll have you know that these were made by the finest manufacturers in Absalom. Each one was handcrafted by like a specific bloodline. So if you're gonna haggle, then take your business elsewhere. Or you could have the person who's like, oh, well, I haven't had any business at all. Would you mind wearing it? And maybe if you wore it around, it might drum up some business if you told people about it. You could go that way. And anywhere in between. There's a spectrum of possibilities. But I like to leave it up to the roll. Leave the situation up to the roll. And I broke it down as far as finding the perfect place, how well the character is received in the place they find, and after that, I guess it just depends on it depends on how much time you want to take. Like I'll say this. As far as negotiation goes about prices, I don't like to go too far in depth in that unless everyone is there. If it's something that everyone is negotiating for, great. But if individuals are going out and they want to haggle, I prefer to leave that just up to a simple dice. Price negotiation up to simple dice roll. Because, sure, a price negotiation can be fun, maybe, but if you have a bunch of players who are going to a bunch of different places to shop, I don't think we want to see the same kind of like tactics over and over and over again. Not to say that they would, but I'd rather speed through that part, right? Now, as far as like the little elements, and here's where we can heighten things of like perfect place, imperfect place. I mean, usually I would put somewhere between like maybe a 16 to 20. Perfect place. If you've got a 20, exactly what they want. 11 to 15, good, but something's wrong. Maybe they don't have their size. Maybe it'll take too long. Just like little things that separate it from being a perfect place. Maybe like a 5 to 10 would be like if you're if the place they find is, it's like meh. I mean, you might be able to find something in the same vein. I'm picturing kind of like if you have a for some reason I'm thinking back to like school and how like you'd have to get like a specific kind of tie or a specific color dress or something, and it's like 5 to 10 is probably where if you go there you get something that's just a little not quite there, and then 1 to 4 is where there's something enormously wrong. And for some reason, they gave me the date. Okay. Oh yeah, 1 and 4. That makes sense. But yeah, if you roll a 1 to 4 on the dice, something enormously wrong, like my situation going into a place with $2,500 shoes, natural 1, that's where you get to make something horribly wrong here. Maybe, oh my gosh. Okay. I've got a front for you. I have a story for you. But before I go to that, I think haggling needs to be narrative appropriate too. A bard of plus 15 will always succeed given the chance. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I have a tactic for you too. If you're in a situation where bard basically has auto success on haggling, there's a counter that you can do. Depending on how the player is and how the character has shown themselves to be, if you're in a situation where you have a shopkeeper who has a priceless artifact, and the bard is like, hey, I want to haggle down significantly. Well, this is something you can do. This is a little sneaky, but this can help you keep... If this artifact is that important, this is something you could do to either spark some character development or make the haggling more difficult. Make the shopkeeper very sympathetic. Because if the shopkeeper who has this artifact is just like trying to cheat everyone, I'm thinking kind of like, skeevy pawn shop vibes, then yeah, everyone's going to want to haggle them down or even steal from them. So I'm going to put that skeevy pawn shop, or if you instead make the shopkeeper a person who the players will feel sorry for. So, let's say the shopkeep, the bard goes up and is like about to haggle, then you could be like, hang on, before you start haggling, I want you to roll a perception check. And presumably when they're at the level where they have auto successes on haggling, the perception's going to be pretty good too. They might roll, let's say they roll pretty decently, like a 15. They might see, okay, the shopkeeper has a picture of his family in a little frame. And it looks like it's very, like the frame itself, it's been around for a long time, to the point of maybe there's some tape that's holding it together, and yet for some reason the shopkeeper hasn't replaced it. Maybe he hasn't been able to replace it. He hasn't. And then like, it's like you start to plant the seeds of the fact that the shopkeeper isn't very successful. And the shopkeeper might be like, hey, I'm glad you came in. I'm sorry, I haven't had a sale in weeks. We're barely hanging on. And then you can play with the emotional element of like, this is a character that, sure, you could probably auto-haggle your way past, but do you want to? After seeing the 10 kids the shopkeeper has to take care of in this broken down frame, this picture frame, and it's like you can kind of see like smudges where the shopkeeper has like every day to keep him going through the day, he kisses the picture of each of his kids just so he can hang on, just so he can hopefully have some business today. And if the bard still goes for the haggling anyway, then we've learned something about the bard, and that's something that we can play with later on. And the other characters around might react to that too, if they see this. They might be the ones who prevent, or maybe like they might prevent the haggling, like the drop in price, or one of them might even, as they're leaving, go back and slip the remainder of the gold because they feel bad. So there's a lot of ways we can handle this. But we are at a little over an hour. Sorry, I've gone on a little bit long. I'm going to end with one final story because we did talk about a critical one as far as finding the perfect place is concerned. And this is, well, thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate you sticking around. No worries at all. Have a great night. I'm sorry, I'm sad you'll miss this story, but you gotta roll out, you gotta roll out. So, if someone rolls a natural one, there's one time where I felt like I rolled a natural one in Hong Kong because I was walking around, as you do, and I'm gonna switch back over to just me because I'm not gonna take notes on this. Who knows what'll happen? I was walking down the street and I saw a shop. Like, I mean, there's so many shops. They do like the metal grate thing, but they open it up and you step in and they're usually very cramped and small. And there was one time, it was crazy because I looked in, there wasn't a sign, not up above, not where it would normally be. But I look inside and this place was completely empty. Completely empty. Except for in the very center, there was a desk, there was a man in a suit, and there was a little sign that said restaurant on the desk. And I was dumb, and I looked in and I made eye contact with the guy in the suit for too long. And then I was like, oh crap. And I hurriedly turned away. And I hoped that nothing was going to happen to me because, I mean, there have been plenty of places that I've gone by that I've thought was a front. But never have I seen one that was so blatant. Where there was no facade whatsoever. There was no food there. There were no tables except for the one that the guy in the suit was sitting at. And usually there would be some sort of operation, right? There'd be a name on the business. But there was none of that. Empty, just a desk, a man in a nice suit, and a sign, it's like one of those signs you might have on like a boss's desk that says their name, but it just says restaurant. And I got the heck out of there as quickly as I could because I was like, I made eye contact with someone who's probably like in a triad or something. All right. I made the mistake. So, yeah, that could be what happens if a player rolls a natural one for their character trying to find the shop they want. They might encounter a front. The front could actually sell something good that they want, but then they end up dealing with some shady characters that they might not want to deal with. Or it could be like what I encountered, where you see something claiming to be a restaurant and all of a sudden you just get that feeling of dread of like, oh no, what have I looked at? Who did I make eye contact with? So, yeah, that was it for tonight's stream. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. We talked a little bit about how to make any session interesting. And I specifically used the example that happened in one of my games recently of shopping. Making a shopping trip into an interesting session. Focusing specifically on, first off, giving players time. Figuring out your balance of prep versus improv, and then list building so that you know how to play what might happen in those areas. And then making rolls to see if they find a good place, if they find a good person that they can interact with, and then dealing with the price negotiation. So, I hope y'all enjoyed this. Thank y'all so much for tuning in. If this is your first time, I have a bunch of videos that are way more structured than my streams tend to be. But if you want to learn more about role playing in your TTRPG games or just improv in general, then please check my channel out, subscribe. But until next time, thank you for tuning in, and take care, everybody.